My family celebrated my wife's mother's promotion, but my name was left out of the speech. My brother-in-law laughed and said, "Guess you never did anything worth mentioning." I smiled and said, "Funny, considering I paid for half this party," as silence fell over the room. 30 minutes later, my wife's mom grabbed the mic and exposed everything. My wife and I were sitting near the back of the rooftop venue. The party was for her mom, who had just been promoted to a national role at her firm. It was a big deal, and we pulled out all the stops. I paid for half of it, which I was happy to do. Or at least I thought I was. Everything seemed fine until the speeches started. Her mom went on and on thanking everyone. My wife, her son, my brother-in-law, even her coworkers. I didn't expect a full tribute, but when she skipped my name entirely, it stung. And then her son laughed and said, "Guess you never did anything worth mentioning, huh?" I smiled, looked around at all the guests, and said, "Funny, considering I paid for half this party." The room went silent. I sat back down, and nobody said a word. 30 minutes later, my mother-in-law took the mic again and exposed the truth about everything I'd done for this family behind the scenes. It started like 100 other family functions I've sat through over the past decade. My wife, Maeve, was radiant in her silver cocktail dress, effortlessly charming everyone she spoke to. She was glowing with pride over her mother's career achievement, and I admired that about her. I've always admired Maeve's loyalty to her family, even when it made things harder for us. I'd been married to Maeve for 9 years. We met in Portland at a conference, of all things. She was fresh out of grad school and had this intensity to her, passion for kids, for education, for making a difference. I was already well into my career as an architect. I liked how different she was from me. Where I was methodical, she was emotional. Where I built things, she tried to heal them. It felt like a perfect balance. But somewhere along the way, that balance started to feel off. Her brother Cashel lost his job in California 3 years ago and asked if he could crash with us for a couple of weeks. Weeks turned into months. He didn't work, didn't contribute, didn't even clean up after himself. I paid the bills. Maeve made excuses. And I bit my tongue. Again, that's sort of been the theme of our marriage. I quietly step up. Her family takes. She apologizes later, if I'm lucky. When her mom, Noelle, got the big promotion, everyone wanted to celebrate in style. Maeve and I agreed to split costs. But when the invoices came due, it was mostly me. She contributed what she could from her smaller salary. Cashel, not a penny. Still, I didn't complain. I respected Noelle. I really did. She'd worked hard and built something real. She had this crisp, commanding presence. Someone who could walk into a room and make you want to sit up straighter. I didn't need a thank you parade. I just expected basic acknowledgement. When the party began, the rooftop looked stunning. I had worked with the event manager myself. Custom lighting, professional sound system, curated cocktail list. The place overlooked downtown Portland, and with the sun setting behind the buildings, it looked like a movie set. People were impressed. Maeve was glowing, and I was just glad everything had come together. But then the speeches started. Noelle took the mic with the confidence of a keynote speaker. She thanked Maeve for being her rock. She praised Cashel for being her unfiltered sounding board. She gave a nod to her coworkers for their endless support. She never said my name. It was subtle at first, like maybe she'd just forgotten. But as she moved from one story to the next, referencing every person at the table, I realized this wasn't a mistake. She sat down to applause, and I felt something sink in my stomach. A mix of embarrassment and realization. I looked at Maeve. She didn't seem to notice. Then Cashel grabbed the mic. With the exaggerated charm of someone already a few drinks in, he started cracking jokes. Light, easygoing stuff at first. Then he looked at me and said, "Some of us just show up and enjoy the perks, huh, Hugh? Guess you never did anything worth mentioning." People laughed. Not everyone, but enough to sting. And in that moment, something snapped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get angry. I just stood, looked at the crowd, and said, "Funny, considering I paid for half this party." I didn't say anything else. Just sat back down. The silence that followed was deafening. People shifted in their seats. Glasses clinked. A few people murmured. Cashel tried to laugh it off, but it didn't land. Maeve leaned toward me and whispered, "Was that really necessary?" And I turned to her and said, "Was any of this?" She didn't reply, just sat there, eyes fixed forward. The party moved on, kind of. Music came back, though people weren't dancing. The buzz had dulled. People were talking, but not about Noelle anymore. About 30 minutes later, I saw Noelle stand and head back toward the mic. She wasn't smiling anymore. I didn't expect what came next. She cleared her throat, adjusted the mic, and said, "I think I need to set something right." All eyes turned to her. "You didn't just help pay for this party. He's been helping this family for years." And I didn't say his name earlier because I was too proud, too caught up in my own narrative. But he deserves recognition. Then she started listing things I'd done. Rent for Cashel's apartment after his layoff. Quietly wiring money to fix the roof on her beach house in Cannon Beach. Funding Maeve's emergency dental surgery when her insurance didn't cover it. All things I'd done privately, because I thought it was what family did. You could feel the room shift. Whispers, glances, awkward shuffles. She ended with, "I'm sorry, Hugh. You deserve better. And I hope my daughter realizes what she has before it's too late." And then she sat down. I didn't move. I wasn't sure if I felt vindicated or humiliated. Maybe both. Maeve didn't speak. She just kept looking down at her glass. Eventually, I stood up and left. I didn't storm out. I just needed to breathe. Maeve followed me to the parking lot a few minutes later. "Hugh," she called. "Wait." I stopped, hands in my pockets. "That was a lot," she said. "Yeah." I didn't know she was going to do that. "Did you know what your brother was going to say?" Silence. "I didn't want to make a scene," she offered. "It was a scene," I replied. "And you just watched." I unlocked the car. Got in. She didn't stop me. That night, I checked into a hotel. I told her I needed space. And I meant it. I stayed at a small boutique hotel near the waterfront. It was quiet, clean, nothing fancy, but it gave me the room to think. The thing about space is, when you finally take some, you start realizing how little of it you've had. Not just physically, but emotionally. Maeve and I had always been close, or so I thought. But sitting in that hotel room with no one around and no obligations to fulfill, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I felt seen in our marriage. Like really seen. She texted that night. A simple, "Please let me know you're okay." I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I genuinely didn't know how I felt. The next morning, she called. I let it go to voicemail. Then another text came in. "I want to talk. Not to defend anything. Just to talk. When you're ready." I appreciated the tone, calm, not pushy. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a walk down to the river, grabbed a coffee from a spot I used to frequent before we got married. The owner recognized me and said I looked like I needed a break. "You could say that," I told her. Over the next couple of days, Maeve sent a few more messages. All short, all careful. No demands. Just openers. But I didn't go back. Not yet. I needed to understand how we got here. This wasn't just about a party, or a missing thank you, or even Cashel's cheap shot. It was about years of being the guy in the background. The one who filled in the gaps while the spotlight stayed on everyone else. And I started seeing a pattern. When Maeve's dad walked out on the family when she was in college, she stepped up. She was strong. She became the glue. The problem is, she never stopped being that glue. And somewhere along the line, she started patching everyone else's cracks, letting me become the foundation. Quiet. Steady. Expected. I didn't mind being the dependable one. But there's a difference between being supportive and being invisible. On day 4 at the hotel, Maeve showed up. She texted from the lobby. "I'm not here to fight. Just want to see you." I came down. She looked tired. Pale. Like she hadn't been sleeping. We sat in the small lounge area. No one else was there. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. "About everything. What Mom said. What you said. What I didn't say." I nodded, waiting. "I messed up," she continued. "Not just at the party. For a long time. I let my family lean on you because it was easier than telling them no. And I didn't see how much it was costing you. Still, I didn't speak. I wanted her to keep going, to say the things I'd been carrying for years. I'm not making excuses. I guess I thought you didn't mind. You never complained. You always just did it. I didn't complain because I thought we were a team," I said finally. "But at some point, it started feeling like I was just your backup player." She blinked hard. Her lip trembled a little. "I don't want that. I don't want you to feel like that. I want to fix this." The thing is, I believed her. I really did. Maeve isn't a malicious person. She doesn't manipulate. She doesn't lie. She just doesn't always see what's right in front of her when she's focused on holding everyone else up. We sat there a while, not saying much, just breathing the same air. Eventually, she stood up. "I'll go," she said. "But if you decide you want to talk more, I'll be home. And if not, I understand." I didn't stop her. That night, I ordered room service, sat on the bed, and started writing down everything I'd wanted to say for years. Not for her, but for me. The list was longer than I expected. Little things. Times when I'd put off vacations because her family needed money. Nights I stayed up helping Cashel tweak his resume. The silent tolerance when Noelle made digs about people who marry into success. And it wasn't just resentment. There were good memories too. Maeve helping me through a panic attack when my firm downsized. Her sitting beside me at my dad's funeral, squeezing my hand so tightly I thought I'd break. The way she used to look at me when I talked about building our dream home one day. So no, it wasn't black and white. It never is. On day 6, I finally texted her. "Let's talk." She responded within a minute. "Whenever you're ready." I drove home that evening. The house was quiet. Cashel was gone. Apparently moved in with a friend in Salem for a while. Maeve had cleaned the living room, cooked dinner, lit a candle like she used to when we first started dating. We talked for hours. Not all at once. Some silences were long. Some words were raw. But it was honest. She asked what I needed to feel respected again. I asked what she needed to feel supported without me becoming a shadow. We both admitted that things might not go back to how they were. And maybe that was a good thing. That night, I didn't stay over. I wasn't ready. But it was the first time in a long time I felt like we were actually on the same page, not as husband and wife, but just as people. The next few weeks were slow, tentative. We started seeing a couples therapist. I got back into hiking. She started drawing again, something she hadn't done since college. We stopped playing host for her family. No more uninvited visits. No more guilt funding. A month passed before I spent a full night back at the house. Not because Maeve asked me to, or because I felt pressured, but because I missed the feel of our bed, the creak of the second stair, the way the morning light spilled in through the east-facing kitchen window. It felt less like returning home and more like cautiously approaching something familiar that had changed in my absence. To her credit, Maeve gave me space. She didn't ask for timelines or reassurance. She focused on what she could control, her actions. That's what started shifting things. She drew up a financial plan for herself. She started redirecting her mother and Cashel to her boundaries instead of leaning on me to fix things. One day, Noelle texted both of us in a group chat, asking for help planning her retirement getaway. Maeve replied with, "Sounds like a great idea. I'm happy to pitch in. Hugh won't be involved this time." Noelle didn't push back. Just a thumbs-up emoji. Progress, in its weird modern form. But there were still cracks. Uncomfortable ones. Like the night I came home to find Maeve sitting on the couch, wine glass untouched, just staring into nothing. "What's going on?" I asked. She looked up. "I've been thinking about that night. At the party." I sat down beside her. "I didn't stop him. Cashel. I didn't stop him from embarrassing you." She was crying before I even noticed. "I hate that you felt small because of something I allowed. I hate that I let you feel alone in a room full of people who supposedly care about us." Her voice cracked. I was raised to believe keeping the peace was more important than being right. But I see now that I wasn't keeping peace. I was just letting people walk on the one person who never asked for anything back. That conversation stayed with me for days. And in some strange, slow way, those moments started rebuilding something, not just between us, but inside me. The bitterness that had clung to my ribs like wet cement began to loosen. We were careful with each other. Deliberate. We started small, coffee together before work. A weekly dinner where phones stayed in another room. Occasional walks down the street just to stretch our legs and talk like friends. The therapy helped, too. We unpacked old stories we hadn't touched in years. Things like her father leaving. The pressure she carried to be the strong one. The fear I had of becoming invisible like my own father had been in his marriage. We argued, sometimes, but differently now. Not to win, to understand. One day in therapy, Maeve said something that caught even our counselor off guard. "I think I married Hugh because I believed he could hold all the weight I was too scared to carry myself." It hit like a punch to the chest, but it was honest. And in a weird way, it felt like love. Not romantic love, but the kind that grows in the trenches, the kind that acknowledges the ugliest parts of ourselves and still says, "I want to try." I wasn't sure what the future looked like. I didn't know if we were going to make it another 10 years, or if we'd part ways in a year's time. But what I did know, what I finally believed, was that I wasn't invisible anymore. People saw me. She saw me. And slowly, I was starting to see myself again, too. Fall came fast that year. The trees along our block turned amber and gold, and the crisp air carried the kind of silence I hadn't appreciated in years. Maeve started wearing her oversized scarves again, the ones she used to wrap around her like armor when she was overwhelmed. I always used to tease her that she looked like she was trying to disappear into a cocoon, but now, I noticed she wore them a little looser, a little less like a barrier. We were still living in the same house, but it felt different. Quieter in a good way. Less frantic, less performative. We were both more intentional. Like two people trying to grow something new in the burned-out soil of something that had nearly gone up in flames. Cashel hadn't been around since the night of the party. Apparently, he moved in with a friend he'd known from college and was looking for remote marketing jobs, something Noelle mentioned offhand during a brief check-in. She kept her updates short now, respectful of our space. Maeve told me she'd had a long talk with her mom. She didn't tell me everything, just that she'd finally said some things out loud she'd been holding in for decades. "You were right," she told me one night while we folded laundry together. "I always felt like I had to carry everyone. I didn't know how to let anyone else hold something without also feeling guilty about it." I looked over at her. And now I'm learning that letting go doesn't mean dropping people. It just means not dying under their weight. She said it without expecting praise. Just truthfully. And I respected that. Some nights were harder than others. Sometimes, I still felt the old patterns creeping in. The quiet assumption that I'd take care of something unspoken, or that I'd sacrifice a plan to keep things calm. But now I called it out when I felt it. Maeve didn't get defensive anymore. She paused. She listened. She adjusted. There was this moment, small, almost forgettable on the surface, but it stuck with me. We were walking through Forest Park, just the two of us, a couple of thermoses in hand. She stopped at a bench, sat down, and said, "I think about what would have happened if your name had never come up at that party. If Mom hadn't said anything." I sat beside her, waiting. You probably would have just swallowed it, she said. Smiled. Kept being the good guy. And I would have let you. She shook her head. That scares me more than what actually happened. I didn't respond. Just reached over, wrapped my hand around hers. It was cold, but she didn't pull away. That's how our days began to feel, like holding hands on a cold day. Not perfect, but conscious. Present. We didn't go back to who we were. We couldn't. Too much had been said, too much laid bare. But we began to understand that maybe that was the point. Maybe the version of us that existed before the rooftop party had to die for something more honest to be born. She started doing art again. Not just sketching in journals, but signing up for actual classes. Even hosted a local gallery showing in a neighborhood cafe. I showed up, of course. Quiet in the back, just watching. She dedicated a small collection to the people we lean on. No fanfare. No big speech. But I knew what it meant. Later, when I complimented her work, she said, "You helped me remember I have my own identity outside of fixing everyone." I forgot that. I didn't say much. Just smiled and helped her pack up her canvases after the show. Weeks passed. Then months. The therapy sessions thinned out. We no longer needed them every week. But we kept going, monthly, more for maintenance than crisis. Our communication had shifted. Not perfect, but deeper. Less coded, less afraid of tension. Sometimes we'd disagree and still walk away feeling heard. And slowly, the house began to feel like ours again. Maeve stopped tiptoeing around her mother's expectations. She started saying no when she needed to. Not cruelly, just clearly. She told Noelle that we wouldn't be hosting every holiday anymore. That our home needed to be a place for us, not just a revolving door of obligation. I could see the tension lift from her shoulders after those calls. We began planning a small trip, just the two of us. No agendas, no family, just quiet. I suggested Bend, where we'd once talked about retiring someday. She smiled and said, "Let's try something new, somewhere we've never been." So we started looking at options. Nothing extravagant, just something honest and slow. That was the rhythm now. Honest and slow. Spring returned like a whispered promise. Portland's rain lessened, and the cherry blossoms started to bloom along the streets near our house. Maeve and I were better. Not perfect, never perfect, but present, connected. There was a new rhythm to our lives. One with clearer lines and fewer quiet resentments hiding beneath the surface. The tension that once felt baked into our marriage had softened into something gentler, more manageable. But Cashel? He never reached out. Not once. After the party and the fallout that followed, he simply disappeared from our lives. Maeve had stopped enabling him. No more just for a little while support or he means well speeches. She didn't block him, didn't cut ties completely. She just stepped back. And in response, he vanished. Until one afternoon, 6 months after everything, when Maeve forwarded me an email. It was from Cashel. Subject line, "Urgent favor, please read." I opened it without saying a word. The message was long, meandering, and, true to form, vaguely dramatic. He'd gotten a job offer in San Diego, something in marketing, but he didn't have the funds to make the move. Needed to secure an apartment, pay a deposit, cover first month's rent, move his things. He wrote like we were still close, like none of the past year had happened. The final line stood out. "You've always helped when it really counted, Hugh. I know you get what it's like to want more from life. I'm just asking for one more push." I looked up from my laptop. Maeve was across from me, sitting on the couch, watching me with a neutral expression. "He sent it to you too?" I asked. She nodded. 3 times in one day. And I haven't replied. We sat in silence for a minute. Then I asked the question I hadn't even realized I'd been waiting to ask. "What do you want to do?" Her answer came quickly. "I want you to respond. But not with money." I blinked. "Go on." She handed me her phone, already open to a note she'd drafted. I read it. I read it again. And then, slowly, I smiled. Because it was perfect. The next morning, I sent Cashel a reply from my personal email. Short. Direct. No emotion. Subject. Urgent favor, please read. Cashel. You're right. I do understand what it's like to want more from life. That's why I work hard, respect others, and clean up my own messes. I also know what it feels like to be publicly mocked by someone I fed, housed, and carried for months. That's something I wouldn't wish on anyone. So no, I won't be sending you money. But I will give you a piece of advice. Start telling the truth. To yourself. To others. That's how you move forward. Best of luck in San Diego. Hugh. I copied Maeve. Just so he'd know the door wasn't open anymore. Not even for conversation. We didn't hear back. Not that week. Not that month. But the revenge wasn't in the silence. It came 2 weeks later when Noelle called us on speakerphone, laughing, not cruelly, but with the kind of exasperated amusement you only get from family drama that's finally no longer your responsibility. "Guess who just called me begging for a loan?" she said. We didn't have to guess. Apparently, Cashel had blown the job opportunity. Never even made it to San Diego. The company asked for a background check and references, and somewhere along the line, it became clear that he hadn't held a steady job in almost 5 years. They pulled the offer. Noelle told him, gently but firmly, that she wasn't bailing him out again, that she was taking a step back. And when he tried to guilt-trip her by bringing up how Hugh used to help without conditions, she told him the truth. Hugh helped you because I didn't step up. That was my failure, not his obligation. And we're not making that mistake again. Maeve just looked at me, eyes wide. It was the first time she'd heard her mother say those words. And that was the revenge. Not the email, not the silence, not the missed opportunity. It was the moment the people who used to take me for granted, Maeve, Noelle, finally stood up for me. Publicly, directly, without hesitation. Cashel had spent years living off our kindness. Years using charm and guilt like currency. But now, the credit line was gone. He was just another grown man with no one left to lean on but himself. And us. We were planning a trip to Glacier National Park. Somewhere fresh, somewhere untouched by history. A place to breathe, hike, and just be. Together. Before we left, I got a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a keychain. A novelty one. Silver, cheap metal. It said, "You never did anything worth mentioning." I laughed so hard, I had to sit down. Maeve looked over my shoulder and rolled her eyes. "Please don't tell me that's from." I nodded. "Oh yeah, Cashel's parting gift, apparently." She took it from my hand, walked to the recycling bin, and dropped it in without a second thought. Then she looked at me and said, "You've got nothing left to prove." She was right. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't in what you do. It's in what you no longer have to.